Hello and welcome to the third addiction seminar sponsored by Community Drug Action Team. My name is David Outridge. I'm a medical specialist in addiction. I work alongside the Samaritans Foundation at Broadmeadow. The contents of this seminar is around helping family and friends to work with their loved one in addiction. I'd like to acknowledge the work of Professor Robert Meyers, who has pioneered and researched the community reinforcement approach family training. He is a professor of psychology from Albuquerque and is preeminent in the field of working with loved ones in addiction. One of the main issues with trying to help someone in addiction is that people feel they have no perspective on the recovery process. They don't know where to start, what helps, or when they've done enough. And so people often feel they just are drawn into this sinkhole of never-ending need. What this talk is about is trying to help you understand the process, also how motivation works, how it develops, how it changes, and then what you can do to help using techniques that are espoused in the community reinforcement approach family training. And at the end, we'll look at some resources that may be available locally. This is a diagram of the cycle of recovery. It's an understanding about the process of recovery that indicates that it's not a once and for all event. It's a process of progression through different stages of thinking, often accompanied by relapse and recurring cycles through this process until the person eventually achieves prolonged abstinence. We like to think of it as a cycle upwards, and with appropriate help, it can be. So the first stage is pre-contemplation, which means the person is not thinking that they have a problem. They're quite happy to keep using their substances, and often this is only interrupted when something does occur, such as a drunk driving charge or a change of circumstances where the person may be getting a job where they need to have clean urines, or a relationship which shows to the person that they need to change. Contemplation is the stage where the person is entertaining that there could be a problem with their substance use, and during this time a person may be more open to receiving information about problems associated with substance use. During preparation, the person then starts finding ways to achieve help for their substance use, and this can be a challenging process and one where the system may not be able to help them very readily, and so they often need a lot of help during this time. Action is during this process where a person may undergo counselling, group work, detoxification, rehabilitation. Then this is followed then by a period of maintenance, during which time relapse prevention processes, which may not be quite as intense but nevertheless is important to prevent relapse. If relapse does occur, and a lapse is a single case of drug use, relapse is where it becomes recurrent. This is not a reason to despair, but it is not an unexpected event during recovery, and we should recognise that a person may need to go around this cycle a few times before they learn enough techniques to keep them in abstinence. So it's important not to take the mindset that this is your one last chance. The person learns something each time, and a once and for all approach is often disappointing. So this slide is really just to encourage families that small steps can lead to large changes in the long run. And using the analogy of growing plants, tending to plants and small seedlings, pulling out weeds can lead to large changes whereby the new plant will eventually cover the whole ground and prevent weeds from growing, preventing bad behaviours from having their day in the sun. So the idea is that small steps make up large growth and outcomes in the long term. When trying to change behaviour, we must look at motivation. So what is motivation? Motivation is the reason for behaving in a particular way, and it consists of thoughts or beliefs and feelings about a given behaviour. It's now recognised that motivations can be in conflict. We no longer say someone lacks motivation. They actually lack the motive towards a desirable outcome rather than lacking motivation altogether. So how does motivation change? Let's first look at the smart brain, animal brain idea in relation to motivation. The term for competing motivations is ambivalence. This is the picture that you've seen in previous talks of the animal brain and the smart brain. Smart brain is the rider, represented by the rider, and the animal brain is represented by the horse. The rider may have a goal to get somewhere, whereas the horse may have a different goal, that is to stop and eat some grass. So the smart brain and the animal brain can be in conflict. We recognise this kind of dynamic. For example, when we want to get fit, we may recognise the benefits of health and fitness, but may find it very hard to actually do the exercise. There may be opposing feelings within our animal brain. We may, for example, if we're at the beach, love the idea of getting to the surf and having some fun, but may dislike the feeling of plunging into the cold water at the beginning. There may be some different opposing thoughts. For example, we may have an idea about buying a car. We'd like to buy a certain car, but have a conflicting thought that we'd never be able to afford that. So thoughts can be in conflict, feelings can be in conflict. Similarly, in substance use, at the smart brain, we may have a thought, for example, if I use this weekend, I'll be no good to visit my son. On the other hand, there may be a thought which is in conflict saying, I deserve a good time. I've worked hard this week, so I want to use. Similarly, at the animal brain level, the person may love the feeling of the drug, but also hate the drama that goes with it. For example, the whole social scene and the often violence that goes with using drugs. A change in behaviour occurs when there is a resolution of the conflicting motivations that we've seen in the previous slide. And I'd compare this to a courtroom situation. What's been found in research is that whenever a case is brought in one direction, there is a counter-argument in a person's own mind in the other direction. That is, if we apply pressure to a person from the outside to flow in a particular direction, there'll be a counter-argument in the person and a pushback against that idea. This is like the defence in a court case. And it shows that nagging and pressurising a person to change does not work. In a court, ideas are contested in an unbiased way. The information is presented to the judge, and the judge makes a decision. We have to have faith in the judge. And with our substance-using loved ones, we have to have faith in that person to be able to make a good decision, given the opportunity to hear both sides of the argument. There's no point really applying excessive pressure, and sometimes even helpful suggestions are counterproductive. It's best to resolve a lot of these conflicting ideas in a setting where other people are struggling with the same issues, and there can be a sense of a non-judgmental atmosphere there. In the end, we have to realise that the person can make a decision that we may disagree with, but we have to respect that autonomy. And just as in judge duty, we can't pressure the judge. So the ways we can help our loved one with motivation is by firstly respecting their autonomy. And this is quite difficult when we see them making bad decisions, but we need to recognise that only they can make the decision. But let's have faith in them that given the right information and the right environment, they can make the right decision. Also, the fact that motivations are in conflict and the resolution of those conflicting motivations is what leads to change. Your loved one may have already have concepts that they want to stop using substances, but these are opposed by other motives that are in the opposite direction. By listening to our loved one in a non-pressured environment, letting them talk, not necessarily interrupting with suggestions, but letting them work through their plans and goals is one of the best ways to help them to resolve those changes. The other thing is to have an environment of a non-judgmental attitude. It doesn't mean we get slack on boundaries and rules, but we affirm the love we have for our loved one, and a level of acceptance that allows them to feel no matter what decision they make, that they can still be loved by us. So we're now going to look at some more practical ways of helping our loved one with addiction. Past approaches have tended to focus on confrontation and withholding love from those in addiction until they change. A better approach and an evidence-based approach which is called CRAFT, C-R-A-F-T, Community Reinforcement Approach Family Training, has evidence to show that by maintaining a positive relationship with kindness and respect, whilst maintaining your own needs and asserting boundaries and managing behaviours, has led to much better outcomes in terms of the person with addiction seeking help for their addiction, and also the general well-being of those living with a person who is addicted. There are some common themes that often emerge in relation to families who are living with a loved one with addiction, and these can be things like hopelessness. They've kept trying a number of things that haven't worked and that nothing's going to work. That there's a lot of guilt there, as if something that they've done has caused the addiction. There may be isolation, not wanting to shame the family and keep these things secret from friends and neighbours. The family members may be emotionally worn down and stressed from just the relentlessness of the problem. People may be living in fear for themselves or their loved one. There's sometimes violence towards family members, or there may be the loved one may be exposed to real danger from their health or from the circumstances that they are in. There's a conflict often between wanting to protect the loved one from their own actions and making them standing on their own 2 feet and wear the consequences of their actions. This is often a conflicting motive in the family's mind, and there's certainly a feeling of being manipulated or intimidated by the loved one's behaviours. There are some common themes which also emerge in the ways family react to their loved one with addiction, and these include neglecting their own needs and safety. This often occurs gradually through trying to help the loved one, becoming emotionally exhausted, a level of guilt and self-blaming, which means they don't regard their own needs as important, and they can become depressed, which then secondarily leads to neglect of their physical health and safety. There can also be negative communications. This can occur because repeated disappointments, emotional rundown state, getting drawn into escalating arguments, and possibly suppression of negative emotions leading to a kind of explosion of anger. These negative communications are very natural, but they're seldom helpful for the person. There's also tolerating unacceptable behaviours. This happens gradually through boundaries being worn down slowly. Also a sense of shame and secrecy, and being prepared to put up with things rather than being assertive. Fear of confrontation and possible violence by the person, and sometimes manipulation. There's also a tendency to protect the loved one from consequences of their own actions, and this can be because of fear of real or imagined consequences, legal or otherwise. Maybe they have concerns for the health of their loved one. There's also a tendency to try to keep things in-house and not allow consequences to reach their full extent, such as legal proceedings. Families really do have a large influence over the lives of their loved ones with addiction. This is despite the negative interactions that often are occurring, and families often underestimate their influence and potential in helping their loved one seek treatment. Studies by Professor Robert Meyers and his group have shown that In the CRA family training program, up to 70% of the loved ones of the participants in the family training sought treatment for their addiction. The areas covered include self-care and safety, communication skills, reassertion of boundaries, and behavioural management methods. It's carried out in a weekly or fortnightly group meeting over a period of time, but benefit can still be gained from individual information sessions. We'll pause here at the end of part A of helping your loved one. We'll go on to part B, which is 4 areas of skill development in greater detail.